So these are the solutions to these particular challenges, which we have three questions. There is question 1, question 2, and question 3. So these are the solutions to them. So we just go straight ahead and get to look at it. The first question is, let X represent a number of orders received during a certain day. Create a program that prints a busy day if X is greater than 100 and a calm day otherwise. So by this particular point, we are supposed to create a program that is using conditional statement for us to be able to have those particular solutions. And that's where now we get to use the if statement. So the main aim for our case in this particular case, it is using if statements to be able to create a program. So let's say talk about if statements for this particular case. For you to be able to create the aim of this particular question was to create an if statement. And that's why we get to say X of a variable, let's say 156, that is the variable or the variable X. And then we can create an if statement, a conditional statement where if a specific condition is not met, then the other output will be given as a result. So if we talk about if X, in this particular case, is greater than 100 as per the question states that if a busy day, if X is greater than 100. So if X is greater than 100, then what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to print a busy day in that particular case. Else for this case, otherwise now for our case is where now we get to use else statement to be able to, if it is not greater than 100, then what's supposed to happen is where we use an else statement for this particular case. So else statement to get to the answer of it, or we get to like print a calm day. That is what it means with this particular case. So at this particular case, if we join now if and else, this will be now if else statements. If else statement. But by the end of the day, if you just use if statement, it will print a busy day. And if the condition is not met, nothing will be given as input. So the reason why we're using else is to show the alternative solution was the solution of this particular case. So if we learn our code, having that our variable X is 156, we can learn our code and see that it is a busy day. So if we change our value to be 15, just 15, and learn our code again, we see that it's a calm day. That was the aim of this particular solution. It is aspect of exercising if and else statement as an aspect of it. That is what was the main challenge, or that was the main objective for that. Then there is another question by a tetrahedron is simply a pyramid with a triangular base. It is a solid object with 4 triangular faces, 3 on the sides and lateral faces, 1 on the bottom or the base, and 4 vertices or corners. So if the faces are all congruent equilateral triangles, then the tetrahedron is called a regular. The volume of the regular tetrahedron can be found using the following formula. So we have been given a formula for this particular case, and then we've been told develop a function to calculate the volume of a regular tetrahedron. So the aim of this particular case, it is the aspect of developing a function. And that is what we'll get to do immediately with this particular case to be able to. So the exercise for this, it is how we can be able to use this particular formula. We can relate it in a code and then embed it in a function that can be used by anybody and anytime that you call that particular function. So let's look at the formula. It is the aspect of getting the volume. So our main aim is, we can get to call it tetrahedron for this particular question. And we can learn our code, and then we can get, let me just zoom it a little bit. So we can talk about volume for this particular case. So we are supposed to get the volume for this particular case. And our volume, it is now a cubed divided by 6 square root 2. So that means at any point given, we'll need to use a module math module for this particular case. So in any case now, we'll say we can import math. Math is where we'll get the square root aspect of it. Or else we can get to import square root directly from math. We import square root for this particular case, because at the end of the day, we only want to use square root function or square root module for the square root class for this particular solution. So that's why now we get to take and get to see that volume equals to, let's say, an aspect of a cubed. This is how we get to write a cubed divided by. Now the denominator, we can cross it in parentheses to identify the whole of it, its denominator, so it was 6, multiplied by square root 2 for our case. That is how our formula is square root 2, 6 multiplied by square root 2 is the denominator of the function. So at this particular case, if we just write this and we learn our code, it might give an error. Why? Because the error, now we are talking about integers and strings for this particular case. So that's why we get an error of this particular case. But if we paste this by maybe 7 for our case and run our code, it will get to give us the value of the volume, which is 40 at this particular case. Now we have been told in our question that develop a function. So how do we get to develop a function? We call out a def, then tetrahedron. Then from tetrahedron, we can give the value of the length, which is a. Then from that, we can get to click enter. And then with that, now, having that the a is the parameter or attribute that we've been using for this case, we can get to replace our volume formula for this particular case. And we have defined tetrahedron A volume equals to that particular case. But remember now, our parameter will keep changing because our argument A is what we are using for this particular case. So that is how we get to have the formula, the function of getting the volume of tetrahedron. In this particular case, we get to like the output print, and then we can just give our string concatenation. We can use our, let's say, our volume is, then from there we can get to give a dash, then we can give the volume parameter that will be returned by the formula, and then we can get to use, maybe if it's meter cubed, we just use, because for a volume we just assume our volume was in meters. That is, the SI unit can be anything that you would want. So with that function, now we just correct, we have created a function by tetrahedron function. So if we just get here and talk about tetrahedron, and we give a parameter that is the size of the tetrahedron that we're talking about in this particular case. It is maybe 7 to see whether it will reflect to this particular answer. And that is what we get, formula volume equals to 40 point so many decimal places. So with that, we can get here and maybe decide to put a round of value for this particular case. So round this particular volume into 2 decimal places, and then we can learn our code again. This will give us a better understanding of it. So let's see what was the problem. So we can load this. Oh, sorry, it was supposed to be in this particular case. Yes. Let's round off to this particular situation. So round, then we have this as our first parameter to cross it. Then with that, we can give a 2, then enclose it again, confirm that everything is enclosed in the same parentheses. This is what we are talking about. So for this, that is the volume, then 2 decimal places. Let's learn our code. And then again, that is what we have as the formula, a function that gets the volume of a tetrahedron. That is what we get to see. Now, our third question, it is salary calculator for this particular case, and we have been given that our create a function salary calculator, which will calculate the monthly payment to be made in every individual, and the function will take a dictionary as a parameter. And on a typical day, one is expected to work for 8 hours at a rate of $75 per hour. Beyond 8 hours per day, considered overtime, which will be calculated 1.5 times that of normal rate. So the function will compute the total. That is the question that we have been told. Finally, test the value to see that we've been given different particular aspects. So now we have been provided with an example of the risk that we'll use to test our function. So if you look at the question 1, we used if statements scales for this particular case. On question 2, we used the functionality aspect of creation. Then in question 3, we might be using a whole lot of all the nested aspect of it to be able to get the result, as well as now even working with this particular dictionary. So let's start by taking our dictionary as an what we'll be using for this particular case. So we can call this salary calculator. And we can give that as aspect of concern. That is what we are talking about for this particular case, employees. So we just run the cell and call out employees again. This is what we have. So this is the data that we're using. So if we call out employees.keys, this will return now the names of these particular employees. And if we call out employees.values, this will return the values of this particular employees, that is the hours each and every individual have worked. So if at any given point we like to know how many hours the first employee worked for the whole month, okay? Because in our question, we are talking about monthly payment. So with that particular case now, we'll be talking about the whole of it. So if we just take these employees, if we just call out a single employee for this particular case, we can talk about employees, then in bracket, the first person is Faith Benson, and this is what will be returned. So if we say this, sum of what we just used, employees will be returned as 171. So at any point given, we can be able to get the summation of each and every employee in this particular case by calling out sum, then the dictionary name, and the key value of the one we want. So another aspect of concern that we can get to look at for this particular case to understand it is the aspect of iterating through the employees in that particular dictionary. So if we just say for I in employees dot keys print I, these will iterate through and we get to see all the employees in that particular case. So now with all these techniques that we have just highlighted from the employees dictionary, how we can get to manipulate, we can get to access and retrieve data from a dictionary. Now we can get to use that particular knowledge to be able to work with that, with this particular case. So that's where we get to define a function, because we want to talk about salary calculator, salary calculator for this particular case. And you have to put parentheses of maybe we can say X, because we will need to have a value of X for that particular case. Then we cannot talk about iterating through. So for I in now X, because in our dictionary, our X represents the dictionary that will be feeding it. It might not be employees every time. It might be other. So we will talk about for I in X dot keys. That means we are iterating through the keys of that particular value. Then we can talk about, sorry, it was supposed to be, so for, we can even say for an employee. For employee in X dot keys, for this particular case, we can talk about now another conditional statement. We have been told that if an individual works more than 8 hours per day, it means that is an overtime. And now considering we are talking about a month, meaning 8 hours per day, 40 per month, per week, it is 40. So for this individual work 2 hours maximum of 2 hours overtime, he didn't even reach the 40 maximum, he worked 7 hours. So with that, it means that 40 times 4, it is 160 hours a month. So if we talk about now sum of what we saw earlier alone, employee at this particular case, so sum of now X, now the dictionary, and we enclose our individual, which is for this particular case is employee. Okay, if this particular sum it is greater than 160, it's, let's say less or equal to 160 for this particular case, what do we get to say? Or if that is the case, then we can talk about salary will be sum this sum of the hours the individual worked. That is sum of the hours the individual worked. So equals to sum of the hours the individual worked multiplied by a rate of the rate of $75 per hour. So multiplied by 75. That is what we'll get as a salary. So we can get to say we can print for this particular case, we can print, just use F string and we can say employee for this particular case, employee. And we can just separate by that and return salary as our value. So employee and the salary that he will get, it is that particular effect. Now we can talk about else. Now we just got that. Now else, if the hours are more than 160, they are not less or equal to 160, else. Now it is the otherwise of it. So we can talk about else. We can talk about total salary for this particular case. Total salary means because remember we'll have now even the overtime aspect of it. Total salary equals to 160, lowercase equals to 160, the normal hours multiplied by 75 plus overtime now, okay? Overtime for this particular case. Now, to get overtime, we'll have to use this particular, the sum of the hours the individual worked, which is the sum of the hours minus 160 for this particular, to get now the extra hours. Then we'll have to multiply it by now 1.5 times 75 hours for our case, okay? Then with that, we can enclose this to have it enclosed also, and then we can get to print. For our case, we'll just have to print F string to use for this particular case. And talk about employee. Then we can enclose that and give other information like employee. Then we can give related information like now total salary for this particular case, total salary for our case. So employee and the salary that he got, this is the normal salary that he was supposed to get. This is 160 plus, this is the normal up to 160 hours, then plus the overtime that we were supposed to get. So I hope we have enclosed this well. We're supposed to let's enclose this too to prevent any contradiction of the code. So that is the excess hours multiplied by the new rate of overtime. To get that, we add it from the normal hours of it in that particular case. Now, I think we already have a complete code for this particular case. Let's run our code and see whether it will work. No errors. So let's now call out salary. Then we can talk about calculator. We call about our function calculator. Employees is the dictionary that we had earlier on, and we can learn that to see what is our results. As long as this particular value, Joan, this particular value, Stephanie, this particular value. That is how it is supposed to work, and that's how we get to see the results of that particular solution.